Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We made it. Final session of the day. Thank you all so much for sticking with us. We know that being on Zoom all day can be exhausting, but we really appreciate your dedication to having this conversation with us today. It's really important, and we couldn't have done it without all of you in attendance, so thank you. I am very excited to introduce some amazing women from Catalyst. I've been a huge Catalyst fan for a long time, so I'm very excited that they're here with us today. I'm reading, I'm sorry, I'm going to be looking over here just so I don't mess up my screen, but we've all gathered from different facets of the entertainment, media, and tech community today to develop solutions around ways we can change the landscape of how women and underrepresented groups are hired so they can excel at creative leadership, as well as to enable culture change through engaging and empowering talent. As we wrap up day one, we really want to leave you feeling empowered and equipped to communicate the ideas that you have workshopped today with your respective leadership teams on Monday. So here to help us break, reinvent, impact, and change are Ashley Rivenbark, and it's her birthday, so I say happy birthday, Senior Associate of Leading for Equity and Inclusion at Catalyst, and Andrea Tatum, Senior Director of Corporate Engagement at Catalyst. So I will hand it over to them.
Thank you so much, Hillary, and thank you all so much for having us here today. We are so excited. We've been really kind of pumped for this all week. And then, yes, so as she mentioned, my name is Andrea G. Tatum, and I'm the Senior Director of Corporate Engagement. I am based in the Bay Area, but yes, you will notice I have a slight twang. I am a Nashville native who lived in Atlanta for several years, and so we're thrilled to be here with you all today. And then I'll let Ashley just introduce herself briefly, and then we'll jump right in and get started on this session.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Andrea. And I just want to make sure that you all can see the screen correctly. Right now, it's about us. Is that showing up correctly?
Yes, you're all good.
Looks good.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. So thanks, Andrea. So again, my name is Ashley Rivenbark. I'm a senior associate on our Leading for Equity and Inclusion team at Catalyst. I'm based here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I always like to include, whenever I'm doing these introductions, my Chinese name. As you can tell, I'm not Chinese, but I studied Chinese all through college and have lived and worked over there several times and was given this Chinese name by one of my teachers. So, you know, as we go through and we talk about various aspects of our identity and how we bring those to bear in the workplace, it's important to think about all the parts of ourselves that we bring to the table. And so this is one that's very meaningful for me. So, Andrea, I will kick it back to you.
Yeah, great. And I saw someone just mentioned in the chat that you can't hear. If other people aren't able to hear us, let us know. Just make a note in the chat. You'll notice I'm kind of looking back and forth between the two. So I'm trying to manage being able to see that. But yeah, for those of you all who may not be good, people can see in here. Wonderful. Thank you. For those of you all who may not be familiar with Catalyst, let me just tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. So we are a nonprofit organization that we're headquartered in New York, but we are a global nonprofit, and we've been around since 1962, and always with this mission around creating workplaces that work for women. So if you can imagine what that mission may have looked like back in 1962 versus what it looks like now, we've evolved and we continue to evolve. And so in 1962, there was a lot of focus around how do you get women into the workplace. And these were oftentimes moms who were transitioning into being empty nesters, and they were trying to think about, okay, well, what am I going to do now? And they were looking at how do we just even get part-time positions into companies. Fast forward decades later, and here we are thinking about how do we not just get women into the workplace, but how do we set them up for success so that we can see them move into more and more leadership positions, so we can see them have a seat at the table as a CEO. We know we don't have enough of those. And how do we get more of them into seats on the boards? There's so much opportunity. But oftentimes people see, okay, Catalyst, your workplaces that work for women. But the reality is, we're so much more than that. And the work that we do is absolutely with this intersectional approach, and we look across everything. So yes, gender identity, we look at race, ethnicity, socioeconomic, your disabilities and abilities. So we look at all of these different things and we bring them into our research, and we take our research and we really turn them into actionable resources that organizations can bring in to really help to create more inclusive workplaces. Because we know that when we create these inclusive workplaces and are able to make progress for women, ultimately we're able to make progress for everybody. So that's a little bit about us. And then go ahead to the next slide and I'll tell you about kind of our approach to what we're thinking today. So I know you all have been in some quite amazing sessions today, thinking about breaking, reinventing, impact, and change. And so we thought a little bit about how does our research bring all of those different elements together, and how can we kind of guide this conversation a little bit further. And so we kind of broke this up, and so we'll focus a little bit on one, how do you break with conventional thinking and reinvent new ways to engage with leadership and stakeholders? And then secondarily, how do you positively impact how underrepresented groups, are hired and empowered, and how do you enable that culture change? So the way that we approached this was kind of in two pieces of our research that we wanted to highlight. And so the first is really looking at inclusive communications. And Ashley is going to dive into the importance of inclusive communications in terms of being able to create these diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplaces. And then I'll talk a little bit about our research around emotional tax and the impact specifically on people of color and women of color and their ability to thrive within the workplace, and how you all can have a positive impact and change through understanding of emotional tax. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Ashley, and I'll jump in here and there, and then that's how we'll approach this.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrea. So yes, so we're going to go ahead and get started with inclusive communication. So again, how do we break with the status quo? You all have come up with a lot of excellent action items and brainstorming today. So thinking about the best ways to convey that to your leadership team, to your stakeholders, so that you can reinvent new ways to engage. And what I want to start with first, just to give us a better idea of what you all have been coming up with today, is to use Slido. You're going to, if you have a QR code reader, scan this QR code. If for some reason you have trouble accessing the site, please just put your thoughts in the chat. I'll ask Andrea to help with reading some of those. Just with presenting, it's a little tough. So the first question we have, and I'm going to go out of the presentation mode here and switch over to Slido, is to list some ideas, strategies, action plans that you and your teams have workshopped throughout today. So I'm going to go ahead and click out of here and go over to Slido. Just want to confirm that you all can see this page.
Yes, you can do it on your phone or you can do it on your computer, either one, and the event code is the 73405. So slido.com, or if you just want to do it on your phone, you can open your camera and use that QR code there.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrea. And just want to confirm, can you all see the Slido page, the blue page that's up on the screen? Not yet. Okay, thank you. Let me go back and make sure I'm putting up the correct screen here. All right. There we go. Great. All right. So we already have some answers coming in. Develop an actual DEI action plan with time-based goals and objectives, and establish that cadence for checking in and tracking to hold folks accountable. How to have effective ERGs in small companies. Excellent. Great. So already some great ideas coming through. Woo. All right, here we go. How to standard, oh gosh, here they come. Reflection around unconscious bias. I have to read very quickly. Changing hiring requirements that limit attracting BIPOC employees. Excellent. Let's see. Acknowledge that your foot is on someone. Examine your own unconscious bias. Yes. Putting funds toward D&I initiatives and not just energy. That's critical as well.
Oh, that's a good one. I love that one. Yes, gotta have some funds to be able to back the work. Oh, these are great.
Excellent. All right. So sounds like you all have been brainstorming a lot of fantastic ideas. I'm going to click to the second poll and have you all answer this question. So what are some roadblocks that you think you might face when presenting or promoting these ideas to your leadership teams and your stakeholders at your various companies? What are some roadblocks?
I'm excited to see these come in. There were some really good ones in that first one coming in.
Here we go. Narrow-mindedness, not enough money.
Whew. Yes. Budget. They feel attacked.
Lack of accountability. That's good. And we're going to talk a little bit about accountability and how that plays into inclusive leadership. Lack of urgency. Tone deaf.
Yeah.
Excellent. So a lot of the yeah. So a lot of the same themes coming in here. Excellent. All right. So I'm going to go ahead back to sharing the previous screen. Thank you all so much for participating in this Slido. It really helps us get a better understanding of what you all have been discussing today. So here we go. All right. Great. So we asked about some of the roadblocks that you all face, and specifically what we're talking about here are roadblocks to meaningful dialogue across difference, because as you all have explained through your Slido responses, you know, a lot of times people are at various stages in their DEI journey and have various knowledge around it, right? So there are roadblocks to overcoming that. Again, these roadblocks can consist of assumptions, attitudes, or experiences that can stifle our ability to talk across difference. And it can come from a lot of places. Again, lack of knowledge, this idea of diversity fatigue, that you don't have the ability to make this difference, right? So these are very common roadblocks. And they can be put into three categories. First of which is there isn't a problem. And I noticed, again, some of you put tone deaf, right? That can fall under this as well. So especially when we're thinking about our various identities, right? That you see here on the screen, some examples, gender differences don't matter, or, this idea of being colorblind, that we don't see color and only people, and that these, components of our identity are not relevant in the workplace. And that simply isn't true, right? That when we come to work, we're not just doing the work, we're bringing ourselves to the work and our experiences and our viewpoints and our perceptions, right? So it is important to address these things in the workplace so that we can create a more psychologically safe environment. Another theme is there's no benefit to talking, right? Talking about our differences can only further divide us. If you all are bringing new ideas to the table that'll rock the boat a little bit, right? There's this worry that, talking isn't going to solve anything, that, it's not good to bring these varying ideas to the table. But the problem you fall into here is this idea of groupthink, right? If you don't bring your perspectives to the table, you're not going to come up with innovative new ways of thinking. And finally, there will be negative consequences to my actions, right? So if you are someone that is very passionate about DEI and about bringing this change, you could fall into the trap of, oh, there's Ashley again talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Worrying that people aren't going to take your ideas seriously. Or on the other end of it, if you're new to this journey and to this knowledge, maybe worrying about saying something wrong and getting it wrong and offending someone, right? So this idea that there's going to be negative consequences to your actions. And a couple of ways to overcome this, right, is to continuously work on inclusive communication skills. And I want to really highlight that these are skills, right? The more you practice them, the better you will become. This isn't something that I present to you today and you immediately have it, right? It requires you to be humble and vulnerable and to really work on these. So the first one is this idea of inquiring across difference. So really actively exploring the experiences of others to uncover commonalities and make people feel valued. So this can take a lot of different forms. When you're coming up with these new and innovative ideas to present to leadership, always making sure that you have the perspectives of the people that will be affected. So if I'm coming to the table wanting to come up to expand the pipeline and bring people of various identities to the table, right? If my group just consists of people that look like me and think like me, we're not going to get the problem solved, right? So inquiring across differences and bringing those different perspectives. Second, listening and acknowledging, right? Really, really practicing active listening and empathizing with what other people are saying. This is a good one, especially if you are watching, if you're here today and you are a part of leadership, right? And folks are coming to you with these ideas. Really checking yourself to see if you have any biases that are getting in the way of you fully hearing someone and acknowledging their perspective, right? The third one, suspending judgment. So, and this is tricky, but actively refraining from making judgments when listening to others presenting their ideas or coming to the table with their innovative solutions, refraining from feeling the need to add your own editorial comments to the mix, right? We're just really sitting in that space, creating a safe space so that folks can share their thoughts. Number 4, this one is personally my favorite, right? Demonstrating vulnerability. And I think that vulnerability is a very underrated leadership skill. I think a lot of times when we think about leadership, we think about this very strong image that we have to come to the table and be very hard. But I think that, acknowledging your shortcomings and being forthcoming about your vulnerabilities creates trust on your teams, whether these are the teams that are creating new ideas or the teams that are receiving these new ideas. It's all about creating a safe environment and psychological safety so that innovation can thrive. And again, self-disclose. This goes hand in hand with demonstrating vulnerability, right? Being willing to share personal information about yourself and about your experiences builds trust and shows courage. So this is a great place to start. It's definitely not all inclusive, but thinking about these things when you are communicating new ideas with your leadership team. I also want to highlight too the difference between dialogue and debate. And I'll kick it off to you all if you could in the chat, and I'll ask Andrea to help with this because I currently cannot see the chat while presenting. But what do you think the difference between dialogue and debate is? Dialogue versus debate.
See, listening, that there's a difference in terms of listening came through. That's a really great one, Josh. Not trying to win.
Yeah, excellent.
An agenda versus an open conversation.
I love that.
Intent or attitude. I love this one. A conversation with curiosity. Someone knows my word of the day today. Being
Excellent.
open. I love it. Seeing that there is gray. Dialogue and seeking understanding. Dialogue seeks understanding. Debate seeks right versus wrong. These are great. You all are wonderful at this. Yeah, you're getting right to the point here. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. And you got the nail on the head, right? That dialogue is an idea of a two-way conversation that's really focused more on building trust and building relationship and exchanging ideas, as opposed to what someone said, and I apologize, I'm forgetting who said this, but as opposed to winning. And I'll say that, and I don't want to speak for Andrea, but I would imagine you have similar experiences that even as, both of us who teach these practices every day, it's extremely hard. I have family members that have very differing opinions than me, and sometimes feel that even I am coming to the table and I'm trying to prove that I'm right and come with statistics, and I'm like, if I've got statistics and I've got data, there's no way that they can not agree, right? But when you come at it with that debate and that you're trying to prove someone wrong, the person will immediately shut down. And so it seems kind of counterintuitive when you have this new idea and you want to bring it to the table and promote it, to do so in a way that isn't intended to really drive the point home. But dialogue really sets that conversation up to build a space of trust and exchange as almost a prep for the other person to really sit down and be ready to receive your ideas. So it's critical when you are explaining these new action plans and concepts that you've developed today to try to build it from a place of dialogue as opposed to debate. And Catalyst, a couple of years ago, Catalyst did a study of about 2,000 employees in countries around the world. We looked at about 8 different countries about their experiences of inclusion. And we found that some key benefits to inclusion are an increase in team problem solving, right? An employee's view of how constructively their team works together. There's some increase in work engagement, right? An employee's emotional investment in their work. Increase in employee intent to stay, and also in innovation, right? And there is a definite connection between inclusive behaviors and innovation. When you create a space where everyone can bring their full selves to the work they do, then their unique ideas and perspectives will enrich that work, right? So these are a couple things to think about. Again, as you all present these ideas to leadership, thinking about these things as well, right? That the ideas that I'm bringing to make our company more inclusive, to strengthen our DEI initiatives, will have all of these effects. Additionally, inclusive leadership can mitigate the impacts of emotional tax. And this is where I'm going to hand it off to Andrea to explain a little bit about what emotional tax is and what the Catalyst research shows.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashley. This is great. Yeah, and so I really want to think a little bit about the impact that emotional tax has, especially on people of color. And so our emotional tax research, we looked at the experiences of Black, Latinx, Asian, and most recently Indigenous people and their experiences within the workplace. And then we'll talk a little bit more about, once you understand this impact of emotional tax, how to take things like inclusive communications and a few other tools and really be able to continue to enable that culture change within your organization. So let me just explain a little bit about what exactly emotional tax actually is. And so emotional tax is this experience of being different due to gender, race, and or ethnicity, and this constant feeling of being on guard in order to protect yourself against bias or to protect yourself against stereotypes. And it's all of this as an experience and kind of the addition of the risks when it comes to the well-being and productivity. And as Ashley talked about, the innovation around your ability to really just ultimately thrive at work. And so our research really has shown us that for people of color, especially, that bias is a day-to-day experience. And not only does it happen at work, but it's also something that's endured both at work and outside of the workplace. And it can be just acutely painful and incredibly exhausting. And so all of this, when combined, is what really kind of creates what we call emotional tax. And so you may be thinking, well, I've felt different at work, or I've felt like an other at times. But this is a little bit different from feeling on guard, because otherness is a bit more of like a transient experience, and that can happen to anybody based on a specific circumstance that they may be in. And so it's contextually dependent, really. And so someone like Ashley may feel othered in certain workplaces as a white woman, whereas as a Black woman, I may feel this experience all of the time. And so she may feel like, oh, I'm in a majority because I'm white, but there may be times that as a woman, she does feel that sense of being othered if she's in a male dominant experience. So that's a little bit about kind of the difference between that transient experience, and then kind of as people of color, it is all the time. It constantly is in existence, and you're constantly kind of bracing for impact. I tell people all the time, it's like this feeling of like you don't know what's coming at you. And so what happens when people of color experience being on guard? And so, as I mentioned, it's this idea of like having to brace yourself for insults or nonverbal slights, having to avoid certain situations at work because of anticipated bias. And then this last one, which just really resonates with me, is the idea of having to change your appearance in order to protect against unfair treatment or discrimination. And this is one that, for me, really, when I thought about coming to Catalyst, it was because of this research. It helped me to identify an experience that I was having all of the time, and an experience that I see a lot of women of color having. I'm in a lot of groups with young Black women, and I see them ask on a regular basis, hey, I'm going in for an interview really soon. Do I need to straighten my hair? Is it okay if I have locks? Do I need to wear a wig? Is this okay? And they are concerned about going in for an interview and being able to show up as themselves and wearing the hair, the way it grows out of their head. And so for someone like me who wears locks, it's important that when I go to a workplace, that I am not having to be on guard about whether or not they can be okay with me not having to fit into these standards of beauty that have really been imposed. And so when I think about, the entertainment industry and all these different things, it's that ability to see representation. When people see women of color and Black men in different circumstances that maybe they aren't accustomed to. Like I think about how exciting it is right now when I see women like Tiana Paris or Saniqua Harris Green on screen with their natural hair and the exposure that gives to more people. It helps to kind of lessen my sense of being on guard, because now I'm like, that's becoming this standard that people can get really used to. And so I don't know if that idea of emotional tax, bracing and having to be on guard resonates with other people, but I'd like to know if in the chat, if you have ever had to experience this kind of emotional tax where you needed to brace for impact, as I would say. And so you can throw it up in the chat if you've ever had this experience or if this resonates with you. I see some yeses coming in. Yeah, for sure. 100%. Thank you. Yeah, it's really this unique experience. And I saw someone talk about code switching in the chat. Absolutely. Having to alter bits and pieces of who you are in order to try to fit in order to get ahead, in order to land that job, to get that promotion. And so we're really having to try to figure out, how do we help to combat this experience? And so it was really fascinating to me that we found in our research that 58% of Asian, Black, Latinx, and multiracial employees reported the idea that they felt like they had to be highly on guard day to day. And then we saw that in Canada, when we did this research, that 77% of East Asian, South Asian, and Black people who were interviewed and shared their stories also reported being on guard. And most recently, we even did this research in Canada and started to bring in the experiences of Indigenous people. And we saw that 52% of the people who we surveyed said that they were like, yes, I have felt this, I have experienced this. And you can see here that it's even higher when it comes to Indigenous people, that women especially said that they felt this. But it is really interesting that in the different studies that we saw, when it came to men, Black men and Latinos, they really felt that they had also experienced this, and their numbers were really high by comparison to Asian men who did not say they had experienced it quite as much. And that was because Black men and Latino men felt like they needed to kind of be different, because the way someone may just perceive aggressiveness or these other like dominant behaviors, that did not work for them. And they always felt like they had to kind of try to fit in and be different. And so this experience is really, really interesting. So why does all of this matter, and what does it cost organizations when it really comes to emotional tax? And so, as Ashley mentioned, there's an impact when it comes to retention. Those who have said that they've experienced being on guard say that they have a dangerously high intent to quit. And you can see the numbers. I won't rattle them all off to you there, but it's really interesting that they're saying, like, I'm more likely to want to leave, because who wants to experience that? Who wants to have that type of experience in their workplace day to day? And so it's this constant state of having to say, like, okay, this is going to happen. Let me put on my armor. There's this one piece of research that we got from an interviewer. It was a Black man, and he said, every day when I think about going to work, I have to put on my armor. And so people are thinking, well, I may just leave this situation instead of wanting to stay, because this is what I'm experiencing. And in addition to retention challenges, it also has a threat to your health and your well-being. And so you can see the numbers there. But oftentimes we saw that people who reported being on guard said that they had sleep problems. And so think about, your inability, if you're tired and exhausted, and you are doing what I call the mental gymnastics of having to try to fit in. Are you bringing your whole self to work? Are you being able to be creative and innovative? I talk a lot about how back in the day when we worked in offices, I would be cold. It's hot. I live in California, and you see I'm in a turtleneck. I'm always cold. I'm that person. And so I would go in, I'd be cold. And at one point, someone told me that because I was sitting here trying to get warm, that I looked angry. And I was like, I'm not angry, I'm cold. But how often now do I think about that someone has told me that instead of being just myself and trying to stay warm, I am processing, what do they think? Do they think I'm mad? Do they think I'm angry? That really impacts my ability to be innovative and to bring all of myself to the table and to contribute in a way that is meaningful. So just kind of thinking about simple experiences like that. But even though people of color are experiencing this, they still want to succeed. They still want to be able to do well in their organizations. They want to be able to thrive. And so I wanted to share this one other experience that someone mentioned within our research. And they said, I work from home, so none of my colleagues can see me. Based on the sound of my voice, they assume that I am a young Caucasian female. And so they're very comfortable making racist comments against different nationalities. And I have to pretend that I'm not offended. And I'm encouraged by my superiors to suppress my true identity. So I saw in the chat, several of you all mentioned that idea of having to code switch and to go back to that idea of having to change bits and pieces of who you are. If this was your experience at work, why would you want to stay? And it was when I read this example, it really just said, oh my gosh, Andrea, like you've endured that. How many times have I had someone tell me, oh, you talk white? And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. What does you talk white mean? And so it's those kinds of things where you're constantly having to just navigate this experience. But as I said, even though people are experiencing these types of things in the workplace, there's still this desire to thrive and to succeed. And so I want to move into how can organizations really help to make a change? What are some things that they can do to help alleviate this sense of emotional tax? And so in our research, we talk about this inclusive leadership model, and it's about leading inward which means you're really taking a look at what's going on and being accountable for yourself. And that's your ability to act courageously, learn, and self-reflect. And we talk about leading outward. And that's your ability to like bolster your team members and their capacity to be empowered and be treated fairly. And you'll notice that it said bolster your team members' capacity to be empowered. We talk about how people don't empower other people, but you create space and the ability for them to be empowered. And so there's the accountability, ownership, and allyship that fall under leading outward. And then curiosity, humility, and courage that fall under the idea of leading inward. And I saw someone earlier had said, you know, what is one of those keys to inclusive communications? And they talked about curiosity. And I was so excited when I saw that. Like I said, it's this kind of key word for me. And so when we think about curiosity, I want to just kind of like dig into that a little bit. We know that through our research, we have seen that curiosity is a complement to allyship, and that it can really boost the ability to create inclusion, especially for people of color. And so when I talk about allyship, I'm talking about actively supporting people from marginalized groups. And I reiterate that allyship is a verb. It is an action. It requires work. And here we talk about using as much of your institutional, social, and cultural privilege and power in order to advocate on behalf of people who have faced oppression. And then in terms of curiosity, that is you actively seeking out different points of views, listening to others, learning and reflecting on what you've heard. So all of that good stuff that Ashley was talking about in terms of one of the things that you all said was something you were concerned would be a problem is, you know, saying that there's no benefit to talking. There is. And there's this benefit to being curious and understanding people who are different from you. And so we really encourage this as something that you can take back and implement and encourage your leaders to start doing right away. And then in addition to that, so go a little bit deeper into how curiosity complements this. So being curious is this ongoing and persistent learning, right? And so it's not just deciding that when something happens, that all of a sudden you want to go and ask a bunch of questions. I talk about like a healthy sense of curiosity, which is get to know people from marginalized groups in a personal way, like you would anyone else, and not just waiting for someone, you know, unfortunately, when we have something like the murder of George Floyd and saying, well, now let me go ask all the Black people today about their experience. That is when it becomes exhausting. That is when, versus when you are an ally and you have always been curious, you've created a relationship. And that's what makes you a more effective change agent. So you have a clearer picture of people and who they are, but you also understand their strengths and their unique contributions to your organization because you've gotten to have that relationship with them. You've built that up over time. So that's just something else to really keep in mind. And then last,
Andrea, do you mind if I add something here as well?
Absolutely.
I think, and it's and I love what you said, and it's so critical too for folks that are in a position of privilege to recognize as well that people of color and people that you are trying to be an ally for it is not, like Andrea said, their job to provide the answers. And I can't tell you how many times, and I'm glad I've been told this through my DEI journey, that I've been told, Google it, right? Do your own research and your own work to start to build your knowledge around the subject, and then reach out and create those authentic connections, like Andrea said. But that is one area too that can really cause emotional attacks, is constantly feeling that others need to provide you with that information when, you know, as an ally, you have the capacity to go and search that and make that have that authentic exploration yourself prior to engaging in those discussions.
I love that. Thank you for adding that in. And so I think that was a perfect segue, kind of into this last piece around creating empowering workplaces. And as I said earlier, we're talking about really creating this space where people can be empowered to be able to thrive and succeed. And so one of the ways, and we kind of give these 4 different ways, and these are just 4 things that anybody can do, right? And so when we think about the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's very easy to think like, all right, like that's one person's job. But really as managers, as leaders, and I talk about leaders aren't just people who are people managers, we all have an opportunity to create these empowering workplaces. So here's 4 things that really kind of, you can go back and to take this to your leadership or to implement on your own. So one of the ways is to just talk to me. And we've had a lot of conversation today around that inclusive communications. So encourage me and other direct reports or colleagues to have open discussions about our unique experiences. Allow us to talk about that so that people are able to value us for the unique perspective that we bring. Trust me to do my work. Give me the autonomy to do my work where and when works best for me. So having that level of trust in people, stand by me. When issues occur, back me up, give me air cover, right? I think this is one of the most important ones for me personally is when I have a leader or when I have a colleague who I know will stand by me. And in moments when I may need to have a moment for myself, when the world seems tough, when there's other things going on, or if I'm, advocating for something like change within the organization, I want to have a colleague who will stand by me and stand with me. And then lastly, equip me and able to do my best, like to the best of my ability to be able to do my job. And how do you create that opportunity? So let's think about that a little bit. What can you all do? What are some things that either you want to do or that you want to ask your leadership to think about being able to do? And you can go into the Slido again. And so I would love to hear from you all, either which thing you think that your leaders can do. And you can also drop this in the chat. That's also just fine. So is it talk to me? Is it trust me? Stand by me? Here it comes. She's popping that back up there. Talk to me, trust me, stand by me, equip me. And so you can pop that in there. You can either use the QR code or go to the slido.com. And which thing would you implement, or which one would you encourage your leadership to begin working towards to create a more empowering workplace? Okay, all right. Talk to me. I see a few coming in now. Stand by me and equip me. Absolutely, I love that. Love that. See more stand by me and equip me. Yeah, I mean, this is, like I said, this is something that is so easy to begin to do. And what this really does is, as you're thinking about all of these things and how are you going to implement change, these are just some simple ways right away that you can be able to implement change within your organization just by creating that empowering workplace where people do feel that psychological safety, where they feel like they are valued, belonged, and can be their authentic self. And all of these things that you all are popping in here, the equipment and talk to me, allow for all of that to happen. So I know we're coming right up on time, and we have an opportunity to do a little bit of Q&A. Is there anything else before we wrap up, Ashley, that you also want to add in just wrapping this up?
Oh goodness, I don't want to. I think you've said everything perfectly. I don't have anything else to add. So yeah, we're happy to take any questions around inclusive communications, around emotional tax catalyst, anything.
Thank you both so much. We have some questions coming, but I have one question to kind of start us off, if that's okay. You know, we all here are a very engaged audience that chose to be here, that want to have these conversations, that want to commit to doing this work. What is your recommendations for the people in our industries, our workplace, who don't want to engage in these conversations, and how do we bring them to the table?
Yeah, I'll start, and then Ashley, if you want to jump in. You know, when I think about this work, I try my best to figure out how can it be embedded into everything that we do, so that it doesn't feel like you're just kind of being hit with this. And to Ashley's point earlier, right, this can really ultimately lead to diversity fatigue. But the idea is that when I think about leadership, for example, and when I talk to a lot of my organizations that I partner with, I say, well, let's talk with your learning and development team. Who is helping to create your leadership training programs? Because when Dee and I may sit over here in this little silo, people may be less likely to want to engage with it. But when you give someone the opportunity to say, hey, we want to help to grow you and give you a development opportunity as a leader. Well, all of this stuff that Ashley has talked about, inclusive communications, well, why is that so specific to just having to be in a silo as a diversity thing? That is a great way to implement leadership development. You can become a more adept leader through inclusive leadership. You can do all of these different things. And so finding ways to bring that into your overall conversation and realize the impact that they ultimately have can help to create that diversity and inclusion. But I love to bring it into the most general of conversations and not say, this isn't just about race, this isn't just about gender. This is about creating an inclusive workplace that works for everybody in the organization.
Yeah. And I'll say too, I think, like Andrea said when she was discussing emotional tax, that these issues and these discussions and these topics become more salient as you have them with people. And so if people don't care about these topics, aren't thinking about these topics, it's likely because, there aren't, everyone looks like me in the organization, right? You're able to easily avoid these topics because you don't have to face them and hear from people who they affect every day. So I think it's critical to think about your recruiting and making sure that you have people from a plethora of identities on your team, and then use that dialoguing skill to talk with them, learn more about these kinds of issues. And then it's not something that you can avoid. It's something that, just like Andrea said, becomes part of the natural discussion and your workplace goals.
Of that, thank you. Andrea, I don't know if you're able to see the chat too, but I'm happy to read off some of the questions. There was one specifically for you. Can you speak to microaggression fatigue, and do you have any tips or advice?
It is real, and I've really come to think about the fact that microaggressions are just a form of a greater problem. So if it's race, it's racism. But people are so used to thinking about like this overt, racism, and microaggressions take a lot out of you because it's these small, theoretically small, but they're not. It all weighs on you quite heavily. And so my hope is that through this work that I do and that Ashley does and that Catalyst does and all these other organizations, that we're helping to educate companies on how to create the workplaces where those don't exist anymore. Because I hate to say, let me put this burden onto you, because the reality is I shouldn't have to endure it. I shouldn't have to be dealing with microaggressions. And so we are really here and helping to hopefully educate people to create those places so that it doesn't happen. But for those of us to which it does happen, I say protect your peace, protect your mental health, assess if the environment you are in is worth the while for you. And so for me personally, and this is something I speak pretty openly and broadly about, is that I go to therapy. I check in with my therapist on a regular basis because it's important for me to have my mental health in check. And we talk about all of these things. We talk about work-life effectiveness, and we talk about what happens with microaggressions and racism. And of course, I talk about it because this is the work that I do day in and day out. And it impacts me greatly to have to think about this. So all I can really say is just protect your own peace and know, sometimes it's worth the while. And sometimes you have to just say, not so much.
And I'll say too that that's where the action of allyship comes in. That if you see someone if you are a bystander to someone that is receiving that on a daily basis, as Andrea said, they shouldn't have to be the ones to have to vouch for themselves, right? If you get to navigate the workspace and not have to deal with emotional attacks, I mean, it blows my mind that how stressful work is on a daily basis, not having to deal with that added burden. So if you have that capacity where you don't have that added burden, then step up and speak out for those that are receiving it and make sure you're creating those spaces where people don't have to face that every day.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you both. One more question is, can you speak to drafting written communications and content that are gender neutral, not overly masculine or feminine, and have plain language that's readable? Actually, probably generally, opening it up, maybe not just gender neutral, but what tools does your team use when it comes to written communication?
I think, Ashley, you want to start and then I'll jump in.
I was just going to say, we actually have, and Andrea, keep me honest, but we have a tool on our Catalyst website, this bias correct tool that's actually going to be, I believe, relaunching as part of Women's History Month in March. And it's a really great plugin that you can use on your Slack channels and other software platforms that can actually go through and notice, this kind of biased language that you're using and kind of do little pop-ups and call it out. So that's one concrete tool that we have. Andrea, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
No, I think that's just it. It's realizing some of that language. It's so easy for, when she talked about the bias correct, we hear women are often seen as assertive, and there's all these other terminologies versus being able to be seen as leaders. And we have a study around what we kind of call the double bind, and how it really shows that, for women, you're either seen as too soft or too this or too that. And so, for us, we're very fortunate. We spend a lot of time digging into research. And so we are constantly just educating ourselves and really just having to learn. I don't have any one specific tool that I recommend. I mean, I do know that some organizations use specifically for job descriptions. There's some tools out there that will help you to assess bias within your resume, or not resume, sorry, your job descriptions. But for us, it's really just about having it be a part of your everyday language and thinking about that. And the thing about language that I will say is it is constantly evolving, constantly. And so we do have these conversations about, like, is this right? Is this right? For me, even before I came to Catalyst, I was having a lot of conversations about using the X in Latinx and having the conversations with different people. So it's a journey. I will say that I don't have any one thing that just absolutely nails it and gets it 100% right all of the time. It's just about being intentional. And I think even just in asking that question, you're realizing that you have an awareness. And so intentionality is honestly my answer to like 90% of questions in terms of this work. It's just really taking that moment to go back through it and think about it.
Well, thank you both so much. I echo someone else earlier in the chat that said thank you for creating the space for this conversation. We really appreciate it. It was an amazing day, amazing way to close down the day. And I hope that you all listening got some tangible ideas that you can bring back to the workplace. I think we lost Andrea, but thank you, Ashley and Andrea, so much. And Yeah. Feel free to stick
Well,
around.
thank you. This is great.
Have a few closing remarks. So Nick is back. And happy birthday, Ashley.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Great. So we just wanted to thank everyone for attending the 2021 BRIC Summit and for joining the conversation. Change depends on many actions. It comes from a community, not just one person. Your commitment and dedication to making change in your sphere of influence is what the BRIC Summit is all about. In the next 2 weeks, BRIC will be publishing a report based on your thoughts and findings from the 2021 BRIC Summit. Please look at the report in your inbox, read the findings, and take action. As a reminder, there's another full day of programming tomorrow. If you haven't had enough Zoom time with us yet, or Filmocracy time, I guess, please check it out and join us. We would like to thank all of our summit sponsors, volunteers, fellow coalition leaders, founders, and my brilliant coalition co-leader, Hillary. We could not have engaged in so many innovative and enlightening conversations without you. As the Dalai Lama says, just as ripples spread out when a single pebble is dropped into water, the actions of individuals can have far-reaching effects. Have a wonderful afternoon, and on behalf of the BRIC Foundation, thank you again for your time and for your energy that you brought to today.
Thank you.